So we've gathered for our Patimokkha Day gathering. Recited the Patimokkha this morning, Ajahn Yanako did, and here for the observance day. And it's been an interesting couple of days. I don't know if people who might be viewing this on the live stream are aware, some maybe, that we had a fairly sizable snowstorm a couple of nights ago, and a very wet, heavy snow that brought down many, many trees in the forest. It's pretty messy out there. And also all of Tomkai Road, and I'm not sure how far into Redwood Valley or Ukiah, but there's been major power outages, and we've been without PG&E power anyway for a couple of days now. We're really lucky that we've got this new generator that was put in earlier this year, or earlier, I guess it was late last year when it finally got installed. And we had generator system put in because of anticipation of more planned power outages in fire season, which we actually didn't have any here this past fire season, but didn't expect that we would be using it before the next fire season. But with many downed power lines and power poles, we're not sure when the power is going to be back on. But we've been very, it seemed like everything is pretty much normal here with this new generator. So the fact that the lights are on and the live stream is happening, I think, it's a good sign. We also just had a technological glitch just before puja started tonight, and it didn't seem like one of the speakers was working. We weren't sure whether we were going to be able to use the system or not, but it seems like everything's in working order again, thanks to our technical support team, Ravi and Tony. So it's just kind of been one of these eventful couple of days and an eventful year, still a year into our pandemic. Just, but life in the monastery seems to keep plugging along. We're very fortunate to have such a harmonious community in so many ways, and the way that people responded to the power outage and the downed trees, and we're in retreat now. But people just doing what needs to be done without any complaints, or even with some enthusiasm to get out there with chainsaws and shovels and trying to clear ourselves up from the mess in the forest. So people are just, the community just keeps doing what it needs to do, and it's really lovely to be witness to that, part of that. And I haven't been much on the scene since the Thanksgiving retreat. I haven't. This is my first talk, actually, and since then, because I'm in a long period of solitary retreat, semi-solitary retreat. So kind of dragging me out for a talk on a mantra night. And there was a request a little while back for what we call our 32 parts slideshow. It's a slideshow that was put together by Ajahn Yatiko and myself quite a few years ago with the theme of the 32 parts of the body, which is a contemplation found in the teachings. And so there was a request for that. Oftentimes during the winter retreat, we'll do it on a one-pra night, observance night. And I think it's been a couple of years since, I don't think we did it last year, but tonight is the night that we'll be doing that at 10:30 over in the dining hall for anybody who is here wants to see that and hear a little commentary about that as we go along. It's, as I think many people are aware, it's a kind of a favorite contemplation of mine, and it's something that I've spent a fair amount of time practicing with and nurturing as a contemplative practice. So I thought maybe I'd just make a few comments tonight about that theme in preparation for our event, slideshow, our form of monastic entertainment. Not a slideshow of my summer vacation. What to say, 32 parts. I think maybe, well, just a little bit of background. A number of people have heard kind of how I got interested or how I came to practice with it before, but maybe I'll just do a bit of a repeat on that for people who don't know that I actually started meditation practice on my own as a solo endeavor, self-taught endeavor, quite young actually, in my late teens, just dabbling a bit, but off and on, more seriously getting involved in meditation practice as I got into my 20s and into my 30s, but all self-taught from books, essentially. Without a particular foundation in Buddhism, I didn't really know much about Buddhism, teachings of the Buddha, until around the age of 30 or so, or maybe early 30s. So I was just practicing from different styles and traditions, and I just knew that inside myself, I just knew that there was something that I needed to do to help settle the mind, and I don't know, it just felt like a thing to pursue meditation, but didn't really find any useful Buddhist resources. I didn't really know what Buddhism was all about. Kind of stumbled my way along, knowing that it had something to do with sitting quietly and watching the mind, and then coming across some of the teachings as meditation was being taught in the West from the Buddhist tradition as it came to the West, mostly as a breathing, meditation on breathing as a way of calming the mind. And so just following the instructions that I was able to find. Generally, and as most of people have experienced the teachings as they came to the West from people who practiced in Southeast Asia, Burma, particularly the Burmese style, was how it was often introduced into the United States and Western Europe. And mostly along the lines of meditation is watching the breath at a very narrow focus somewhere in the body, whether it's the nose or the belly or the chest, and developing a real exclusive state of focus on a very small point to help settle the mind and not get distracted. And that's what meditation was, and that's what I doggedly pursued for many years on my own. And got enough enjoyment out of it, or at least enough of a sense that this is something that I should be doing, to keep pursuing it, even though I found it quite challenging to do that particular style, but didn't know anything else really, until I started to get connected with monastic tradition, and that started around in my early 30s, and was introduced to the Wat Pah Pong tradition mostly through the West, Amaravati, England. Ajahn Amaro was just starting to make some regular visits to the West Coast on invitation of Sangapala, and got to know the tradition in that way through gradual exposure. And a whole new world started to open up, and started to really understand and explore the teachings of the Buddha. And as they were brought to us in the monastic tradition, it was of course a much wider range than just a meditation technique. And in fact, my initial exposure over the introduction over many years was very little had to do with actual meditation practice. I still didn't really look for or receive much in the way of methodology, but more was exposed to the broader teachings, Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, and the fullness of the practice, and was quite pleased with that. And all of a sudden it started to make some sense, the world, there is these Four Noble Truths to contemplate and understand. And still, though, just kept on plugging away with my meditation technique that I had learned on my own, but not really developing a lot of what I considered, a lot of competence with it. But it didn't really seem to matter all that much to me because of the wider perspective that I was starting to understand. And then finally making the decision to pursue monastic training around the age of 40, ordaining here at Abhayagiri. And the first 6 months that we were here, just was so busy getting the monastery set up and clearing paths and just in my role as anagarika, just doing the duties of an anagarika and keeping pretty much occupied that way, learning the precepts, learning how to comport myself a bit as a monastic, still just doing the meditation technique that I had learned on my own. And then finally, after about 6 or 7 months and the arrival of Lungpa Pasano, and we went into a period of a small winter retreat that first year. It wasn't the full 3 months. We started in February because Lungpa only arrived in New Year's Eve, I think. And then it was actually for the first time that I sat down. He was doing interviews with our small community, just a few of us, a handful of us, as he has done in the past during winter retreats. But that was the first year that we did that, and first time I sat down with him, and he asked me about my meditation practice, and I just had to be very honest with him. Well, for 8 years I've been doing this kind of mindfulness of breathing at a very small, narrow, focused point, and just it feels pretty hopeless, actually. I don't feel like my mind gets settled at all. And talked about that to some extent with him, and he was listening, and finally he just said, you should stop doing anapanasati. Just don't do mindfulness of breathing. You developed such a habit of negativity around it because it's not been working. So you need to take a break from it and do something else. And I was kind of a bit confounded. Well, what something else? What is there? What else is there? And he said, well, pick up the contemplation of the 32 parts of the body, which I was familiar with from our chanting, but didn't realize much of it other than that. And just do that. And I said, oh, okay, well, that sounds kind of interesting. Certainly better than just trying to doggedly pursue, out of loyalty, this technique that doesn't seem to be working. And I said, well, how long do you think I should do that for? And he said, a year. And I said, a year? No mindfulness of breathing, no trying to watch my breath. He said, no, just do the 32 parts. So received some instruction from him about how to pursue that, and made that my meditation practice for the next year, memorizing the chant that we do, which is in our chanting book, Pali, English, just spending lots of time memorizing that and reciting that, and developing that over a year's time. At the end of the year, having received a lot of benefit from that, I talked with Luang Por again and said, okay, it's been a year. Should I start practicing with meditation on the breath again, Anapanasati? He said, no, too soon. And I said, oh, okay, well, what should I do? He said, well, maybe switch focus to some metta bhavana, working with loving kindness contemplations. I said, okay, well, that sounds kind of interesting. How long should I do that for? And he said, a year. I said, no Anapanasati? He said, no Anapanasati. So that was my next year, my second year as a novice, took my novice ordination. And then finally, after 2 years, revisited, same scene, and I was given permission to start working with Anapanasati again, but with a firm practice of 32 parts and metta bhavana to act as a very firm foundation, and then to start exploring other avenues with Anapanasati. So right from the very beginning, 32 parts was part of my regular contemplation. I found it so useful and maybe had a natural proclivity for it as having been trained as a nurse and always enjoyed those kinds of anatomy and physiology, and so there was a familiarity with it as well. But just found it so grounding, so useful in multiple ways that really the three techniques, the three methodologies, if you want to call them that, of 32 parts, contemplation, metta, bhavana, and anapanasati, those are still primarily how I spend my time, walking, sitting. Of course, there's lots of other contemplations that start to roll in, all the death contemplation, maranasati, and of course all the three characteristics, impermanence, dukkha, anatta, the piece of nibbana, all many different contemplations start to find their way into, but those three primarily still are a very strong part of my practice. I've never lost an interest in the 32 parts. So that's just a little bit of a background of why I'm involved with it, talking about it. And so just where does it fit in terms of the teachings of the Buddha? It's part of the contemplations of the body, or the reflections on the body found in the Satipatthana, the establishings of mindfulness, the 4 establishings of mindfulness, frames of reference. In the first one on the body, one of many contemplations of the body, and the second and third, fourth Satipatthana, of course, feelings, mind, and a whole series of dhammas, teachings on the hindrances, and 5 aggregates and 6 sense bases, and all those 4 noble truths, etc. But 32 parts contemplation is one of the contemplations of the body. Anapanasati, of course, is one of them, but it's only one of them. And development of contemplation of the body is very strongly emphasized, as people know in our tradition, in its various forms. And I think it's useful to just actually clarify, too, just some of the terms, because I think a lot of the ways that mindfulness and concentration and sati, samadhi, various words are used in different ways. And a lot of the ways that the teachings have come to us have come out of the commentarial tradition, because there's some perceived gaps anyway in the suttas that the commentaries attempted to flesh out a bit more. And what's happened is that understandings of even the words and the uses of concepts of mindfulness and concentration of sati and samadhi have a certain force to them that I think can be confusing. And I think it's useful to point out that there's a common understanding that, like, mindfulness and concentration are two separate practices in a sense. That mindfulness is what you do when you put your full attention in the present moment, just to whatever is arising, and you're just staying present for whatever is happening right here and right now, and that's what mindfulness practice is all about. And that concentration is a separate thing where you put this narrow focus in an exclusionary way to try and develop a sense of peace and calm that is quite focused, a very focused kind of narrow beam kind of attention. And that these are two separate practices that are both needed, but in a sense, one develops them separately. And also, they've become conflated a bit with samatha and vipassana, so that samatha is very much conflated with developing concentration, or samadhi, and vipassana is an aspect of mindfulness, that when you're watching whatever is arising in the present moment through the lens of anicca, dukkha, anatta, well, that's vipassana meditation, which is done as a separate kind of a thing. And it's not that there's not some truth to some of the ways that that's been presented, but a more sutta-based approach, which is becoming a bit more taught and talked about and brought into our awareness these days, is more of a recognition that satipatthana, the four foundations of mindfulness, are all contemplations that we do as a basis for developing samadhi. They're not separate kinds of activities. The satipatthana, the foundations, the contemplations, all of them, all four foundations and their various components, are ways of collecting the mind around a theme, a frame of reference that serves many purposes. It serves the purpose of both developing samatha and vipassana. And the result, if done with diligence and clarity, is that gathering of the mind, that collecting of the mind into composure, a very profound state of composure or collectedness or firm establishing that we could call samadhi. So that they're related very strongly in that way and dependent on each other and supportive of each other. And so in that way, the 32 parts are another subject that we can focus our attention on and develop both samatha and vipassana as a support for developing a very strong state of composure, of collectedness of the mind, of samadhi, in a very broad, open, all-around kind of awareness. And any of the contemplations that are found in, say, the contemplations of the body, whether it's anapanasati or 32 parts or the elements or the postures or the activities of the body through clear awareness or even the cemetery contemplations, all of these are ways that one can develop both samatha and vipassana towards that purpose of a composure of mind that is very powerful to really delve into the nature of our experience. And in that sense, 32 parts, sometimes called asubha or contemplation of the unattractiveness of the body, is often seen as kind of a sideline that particularly monastics do to reduce sensual craving, sexual desire, and as such is just kind of an adjunctive kind of meditation that's not really suitable for say, the lay community who aren't necessarily pursuing a celibate lifestyle. But I think that over the years I've kind of found from many of our lay practitioners a great appreciation for this. I remember many years ago talking about it myself anyway, for one of the first times in a small group. Our good friend who passed away a number of years ago, Iris Landsberg, after I talked about it, she came up afterwards and she said, "Why have you been keeping this a secret?" She said, "This is wonderful. This is the kind of stuff that we want to hear." So I was encouraged by that when she made that comment, to not just, give it short shrift out of thinking that it wouldn't be of use to anybody but the monastics. And it has a very broad appeal, I think, in a number of different ways. It can be used for a number of different things. And of course, it's very useful for the reduction of sensual craving. As such, it's really important, but not only for monastics, it's for anybody who finds themselves caught up with that kind of strong sense desire, particularly in sexual attraction, and find themselves controlled by that in a way that is starting to feel, gee, I'm not sure I want to do this. Be so controlled by craving in that sense. It can be very strong for some people. And whether you're living a celibate life or just trying to be more responsible in your relationships with other people, this 32 parts can be very useful for helping to cool things down to a more peaceful level. Because when you really look at it, is that kind of intense craving, is that peaceful? Is that what we want? We can find a certain pleasure or excitement in it, but in the end, is it really, can you say it's really peaceful? I can't say that. I find, I've found over the years, contemplating it is actually very agitating. and it's not to kind of say that there isn't enjoyment, or that, trying to be a downer for people who are still active in that realm. And it's not a moral issue at all, or it can, I guess it can be if you break your precepts, if you're on the 5 precepts, but more just an issue of looking for a bit more peacefulness and settledness and coolness and clarity. So in that sense, it's suitable for anybody who is looking for that quality of mind. So, it's good to contemplate the reason that you might pick it up along those lines, and looking at what the Buddha calls, in terms of sensual experience, sensory experience, the gratification, the danger, and the escape. We all know that there is a certain amount of gratification in sensual experience, not just sexuality, but in all experiences of the 5 sense bases, 5 physical sense bases. And it's not to deny that there's a certain pleasure, gratification that comes from that. But it's when craving takes over and is controlling our lives that it becomes an issue. It can become an obsession if taken to its extremes. And also, at its best, it's a temporary form of enjoyment, because it's dependent on certain causes and conditions. It has its own lifespan, which is usually pretty brief, and it doesn't last. It's not a long-lasting sense of fulfillment or happiness. So, at its best, that's what the danger is that it requires constant support to keep it going. So, with that in mind, one can say, well, maybe there's a better way, a cooler way to live through helping to kind of settle the mind. So picking up the contemplation of this very body and what it really is all about, because what sense desire will have us do is it will have us see selectively those aspects of our physical experience, or say, if we're interested in attracted to somebody else, then what sensuality or what desire, what the quality of desire will do, is that it will cause us to see what it is that we want to see in the way that we want to see it, such that it supports that desire mind. That's what desire does. It kind of takes control over our attention and notices that which helps to support it and to keep it going. So we see that which is conducive to attraction and ignore the rest. We have to consciously allow ourselves to ignore that which is not so attractive. And we kind of learn to adjust our attention in a very soft, focused kind of a way, so that we see things through the blur of sensual desire rather than through clarity. And what the 32 parts does in that sense is it helps us to kind of wake up a bit and see things as they are, the body in and of itself, through the lens of clarity rather than confusion or this soft haze of rose-colored glasses, I guess you could call it too. And to attend to everything as part of the experience, not just to the parts that will kindle and keep alive the sensual desire. So that's one of the ways that the 32 parts works in reducing that, is by looking at everything. And it's not meant to induce aversion. Some people think that, it's just it causes a state of disgust, aversion. And it's interesting, the word disgust is, if you look at it etymologically, it actually, like the phrase or the part of it called gust comes from gustatory, or taste. So your disgust would be actually just losing the taste. So it's not quite as strong as we use it in its etymological form. It's a bit more neutral. So we're looking just to help neutralize the strong craving, not develop aversion. If we develop aversion to the body in that way, then we're using it, picking it up incorrectly. But just developing that sense of clarity and coolness. It's like, is this really what I think it is? So looking at the 32 parts of the body, going through hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, and then into the internal structures, just develops this sense of coolness and clarity that ramps down the craving and the way that we're looking at things through our rose-colored glasses. And in that way helps to neutralize that intense craving. And just having practiced with that for so long, I just find that peacefulness that comes from that cooling of the way one sees the world is it's really quite wonderful, quite settling of the mind. So that's obviously one aspect of the 32 parts contemplation. In and of itself, too, though, it is just, I find it innately settling in the mind, calming. One of the reasons is, I find, is that it helps to really develop, when I go through the whole body, and the instructions say that you can use it internally or externally or both, meaning in regards to one's own body or in regards to the bodies of other people. Always recommended to firmly establish that contemplation within regards to one's own body primarily, first off for sure, and primarily in general. But that in that process also through the tactile experience of that contemplation, because it's done both recitation, it can be done developing the visual images. That's what the 32-part slideshow has to do with, is helping to develop a visual image, but also developing a tactile sensation of those parts of the body as much as we can feel them, which has actually become quite sensitive to the various internal parts of the body as well as the external on a tactile level. And that doing that, I find, really helps to develop the quality of Sabakaya Patisanvedi, as people know from the Anapanasati Sutta, that sense of experiencing the entire body. That's the third step in Anapanasati, is experiencing the entire body. That sense of, as Ajahn Sucitto refers to it, as somatic presence, that actual experience of the body, the bodily energy as a whole. And that the 32 parts is really very conducive to development of that aspect of our contemplations, that full body contemplation. And I found it particularly useful on the walking path as well, developing that sense of the fullness of the body as it's walking back and forth, and that sense of the bodily presence as a whole, and that the 32 parts is a great way to just introduce that into the practice, into the meditation session, whether it's sitting or walking. or any posture really. So I find that in that sense it's a very strong samatha practice, even independently of the neutralizing effect of craving, the sensual craving. So reduction of craving, calming of the body, developing that whole body awareness that then leads to a natural settling into the anapanasati, the breathing of the body. Once the establishing of awareness around the whole body is done with 32 parts, at least in my practice, then the mind just settles into a very peaceful state of tranquility, oftentimes with just settling with that in and out breathing as a natural result, rather than something that one has to pin down and focus one's attention on through effort. It comes as a natural result through developing that full sense of the body. And then even beyond that, it's a full development of the satipatthana. You get to that part of the satipatthana that goes throughout all of the four contemplations, what they call the refrain, the aspect of seeing the practicing in this way. One contemplates the body internally and externally, as we just talked about, in its arising and in its passing as well, looking at the impermanence and just noticing and contemplating to develop that vipassana aspect, the insight practice of this human body and its changing nature, and how contemplation of the body, the 32 parts, how the skin changes, how the appearance changes over many years, the instability of the health of the body. Those contemplations are integrated into the 32 parts. So we develop insight, we can develop very strong insight into instability and impermanence through that practice as well. And contemplating the body just in and of itself, the phrase in that refrain, or there is just mindfulness sufficient to understand. The practitioner is mindful. There is a body, there is a body sufficient for mindfulness and knowing. Just that one phrase, there is a body. It sounds very simple, but is very profound and points to this not self aspect of our contemplations, the experience of this body just as it is. It's regardless of any opinions or thoughts or ways that I view it. It's just what it is, in and of itself. It's without adding any judgments or values to it. It just does what it does. It's has its own life. It responds a little bit to some of the things we choose to attend to in terms of keeping it healthy or well-fed or maintained, but essentially we don't really have much choice over it. It has its own nature and will go its own way. So in this way, the 32 parts contemplation is a very full, just as all of the Satipatthana contemplations can be. You can develop any of them to a full extent, all the way from just as a samatha development or as an insight development, and as a way of really establishing and settling and composing the mind around a particular theme to bring up a very strong state of samadhi, collectedness that allows for even deeper insight into our experiences. So it's not, 32 parts isn't just an adjunctive kind of contemplation. It can be developed fully, and I think can be a basis for strong realization. So that's kind of a little cheerleading rah-rah for for 32 parts, and how just over the years it's remained very strong for my practice, and that in conjunction with metta bhavana, anapanasati, and many of the other reflections truly have been a blessing in my life. And I appreciate Luang Pa's initial instruction to take that up in my very first year. It's developed, as I was saying, the actual method, which we'll talk more about at the slideshow tonight, maybe talk a little bit more about anyway, in terms of its developing it as a visual practice through really developing that internal image that we can bring up at times in our contemplation to help settle going through the recitation and visualizing them. Just memorizing the 32 parts as a recitation in itself can be very useful, just to settle and compose the mind. And then also in its developing a tactile sense. So it's really kind of merging those three aspects together to form the nuts and bolts of the practice. So I just thought I'd offer these few remarks on the 32 parts contemplation, and 10:30 tonight over in the dining hall for those who wish. We'll go through the 32 part slideshow to help give some of that visual impression and see what use it can be. So I think I'll leave it there for this night's reflection.